If you've ever gone back to a place you loved as a kid and felt your stomach tighten before you even stepped out of the car, you already understand the kind of fear I'm talking about. Not the loud, obvious kind with monsters jumping out of closets. The quieter kind. The kind that waits behind nostalgia and smiles politely until you're close enough to hear it breathe. I'm telling this story in my own words because I've spent years trying not to, and because I've learned something ugly about silence. It doesn't erase what happened. It just gives it room to spread. So yeah, consider this one of those nights where I stop pretending I'm over it, and instead I lay it out exactly how it felt from the inside. It started like a victory lap. My little sister Mia had her phone mounted on the dash like she was co-piloting a spaceship, and the voice of her navigation app kept chirping directions in that bright, cheerful tone that never changes, even when you're driving straight into your own past. In 1 mile, take exit 12 toward Ridgeview. Mia leaned forward, squinting at the tree line. Ethan, turn left after the overpass. I remember it. You're going to miss it like you did the lake house turnoff. I did not miss it, I said, gripping the wheel tighter than I needed to. I took an alternate route. You took the wrong route. It was scenic. Wrong can be scenic. I should have laughed harder than I did. I should have made it a joke. But my attention kept catching on the same thing over and over. The way the forest on either side of the highway looked older than it had any right to look. The trees weren't just tall, they were crowded, like they'd been leaning inward for decades, trying to close the gap. And then, like a prop, someone rolled into place at the exact moment the camera needed it. The first glimpse of the park rose above the canopy. Steel rails, sun-warmed and pale, looping against the sky. A wooden lattice of an old coaster that looked like a barn turned into a skeleton. A faded observation tower with a circular top that used to be a landmark and now looked like a forgotten chess piece. Mia's whole face lit up. No way, it's still there. Ethan, that's the big one. What was it called? The one you and Caleb were obsessed with. I swallowed. Rift Runner. She shivered dramatically. Hated it. You didn't hate it, I said. You rode it once and then declared it cursed and refused to go near it again. Mia nodded like I just confirmed a scientific theory. Exactly, cursed. That word shouldn't have landed as heavy as it did, but it did. Because the thing we were doing, coming back, reopening the park, bringing it to life again, had started as a childhood fantasy and turned into something painfully adult. Contracts, permits, inspections, loans with numbers big enough to make your vision blur. A handshake deal that somehow became real. When I was 12, my best friend Caleb Hargrove was the kid who couldn't sit still through a movie without narrating the ending out loud. The idea that he'd grow up and become the kind of guy who could convince a bank to fund a multi-million-dollar renovation would have been hilarious to me back then. I would have said, Caleb, the human fireworks show, no chance. But people harden into strange shapes when time presses on them long enough. There had been 6 of us in that childhood pact. Caleb, me, Jules, Nate, Sienna, and because fate has a sense of humor, my sister Mia, who got included not because she was part of our crew, but because she never stopped following us around and daring us to kick her out. She was younger, smaller, louder, and impossible to shake. We made the pact in Caleb's basement the summer the park closed. We did it with the seriousness only kids can manage, swearing like knights with sticky hands from cotton candy. We promised that one day, no matter what, we'd come back and buy the place. Not to make money, not to build a brand, just because it felt like the park belonged to us, like our laughter had soaked into the wood and steel and we had a right to it. Then the park shut down, the years rolled on, and everyone grew up into their own lives like separate roads. And then Caleb called me out of nowhere a few months ago and said, Ethan, we can actually do it. I remember standing in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring at a calendar like it was going to argue with him. Do what? The pact, he said like it was obvious. The park, Cedar Hollow, we can buy it. The funny thing is, I didn't say no. I should have asked more questions. I should have been the adult in the conversation. I should have said, "Why now? And where did you even get this idea? And do you know what it costs to insure a roller coaster?" Instead, I said, "Are you serious?" in a voice that sounded 12 again. And that's what nostalgia does. It doesn't just remind you of who you were. It temporarily convinces you that you still are. We pulled off the interstate, and the road narrowed into something that felt less like a highway exit and more like a path someone forgot to keep public. The park's old parking lots opened up on the right, acres of cracked asphalt with weeds growing through the seams like green stitches. At the front gates, a handful of cars were already there, lined up like a reunion photo. A sleek SUV that screamed Caleb, an old pickup that had to be Nate's, a compact electric car that belonged to Jules, and a sedan I didn't recognize until I saw her leaning against it. Sienna. I hadn't seen her in person in years, not since weddings and funerals and the occasional forced holiday group chat. She looked the same in the way that mattered: steady eyes, posture like she refused to be moved by anyone else's gravity. But she'd cut her hair shorter, and there was a calm to her that made me feel, for a second, like I was the one who had been standing still. Mia leaned across me to look. "Okay, wow, Sienna got adult." "She was always adult," I said, and I immediately hated how that sounded, like I was narrating a documentary. Mia smirked. "And Jules, oh my God, Jules is here. I forgot Jules existed. He used to be the quiet one who fixed everything." "He still fixes everything," I said, "just with bigger tools." "And Caleb is—" "Yep, Caleb," she added as he stepped forward with his arms spread wide, like he was welcoming a crowd at a show. Caleb Hargrove hugged like a guy who wanted to make sure you were still real. He slapped my back, pulled away, looked me up and down, and grinned. "You look like you have a mortgage. That's disgusting." "I do," I said, "and I hate it." He pointed at Mia. "And you brought the menace." Mia went right in for a hug anyway. "I brought myself. Ethan is just the driver." Nate wandered over behind Caleb, hands in his pockets, wearing the same expression he wore when he was 15. Mild amusement mixed with the suspicion that something dumb was about to happen. "So," he said, nodding toward the gates, "we doing it?" Jules appeared last, holding a clipboard like it was an extension of his body. "Before anyone does anything," he said, pushing his glasses up, "I want it recorded that I advised against letting Caleb touch any electrical panel." Caleb put a hand on his chest in mock offense. "I'm the one who got us the loan." "And I'm the one who will keep us from dying in a lawsuit," Jules replied, deadpan. Mia whispered loudly to me, "I missed this." And I did too. That was the problem. We walked through the gate without buying tickets. That alone felt unreal, like we'd glitched through a paywall. The turnstiles were rusted but still standing, and the main street of the park stretched ahead with shops on either side, shuttered, sun-faded, and tagged with years of graffiti. Most of it was the usual stuff: names, hearts, insults, bad jokes. But every few walls there were words that didn't feel like random vandalism. They felt like somebody had been trying to leave messages. "Remember the summer KIDS. Where did they go? County KNOWS." Mia slowed as she read one, her smile dimming. "Okay, that's not cute." Caleb's face tightened for half a second, then he smoothed it out, clapping his hands like a host. "All right, ignore the haunted poetry. We're here for a soft opening run-through. Half the rides have been inspected, certified, and signed off. The rest are still locked down. We follow the rules, we don't do anything stupid, we don't sue ourselves, and we have a good day." He said it with so much confidence that, for a moment, I believed him. Let me pause here and tell you what I wish I could tell my younger self. When someone says, "We don't do anything stupid," that's usually the first chapter of a story about doing something stupid. It's like the universe uses that sentence as a checkpoint. If you say it out loud, you've basically dared the day to prove you wrong. We spent hours moving through the park like we were trying to walk through time without stepping on a crack. We rode the smaller rides first, the ones that didn't require courage so much as willingness. The spinning cups that made Mia dizzy and laugh at the same time. A little indoor space ride that smelled like dust and old carpet. The drop tower that Nate pretended didn't scare him, even though I watched his hands grip the harness like he was holding onto his pride. Everywhere we went, the park made noises that weren't part of any ride. Metal settling, a distant clunk, the occasional hollow bang like something shifting behind a wall. Jules checked control panels like a doctor taking vitals. He'd stare at a gauge, tap it, listen, and nod to himself. "Good," he'd mutter, and it sounded less like reassurance and more like a ritual. As the sun slid lower, the park changed. Shadows grew longer and more dramatic. Colors dulled. The cheerful paint on the signs looked less cheerful and more like something pretending. And the whole time, my eyes kept going to the far end of the park, where Rift Runner's highest hill rose above everything else, like a raised spine. That coaster had been mine and Caleb's obsession when we were kids. Other people loved the flashy stuff, the big drops, the rides with music and lights. Rift Runner didn't care about entertaining you. It was long, fast, and had a section where you couldn't see what came next. It had always felt like it had a personality and not a friendly one. Mia hated it because, as she put it when she was little, it feels like it knows your name. I used to laugh at that. By late afternoon, we finally stood at its entrance. The sign still hung over the queue line, though the paint was cracked and the letters were sun-bleached. Rift Runner. The line itself was empty, of course. No crowds, no music, just us and the creak of the wind moving through an old metal railing. Mia stopped at the gate and crossed her arms. "I will operate, I will not ride." Caleb leaned in, grinning, still. "It's not fear," she insisted. "It's a taste, I have taste." "It's fear," Nate said, and she shoved him. Jules ran his hand along a panel near the loading area. "This one was cleared," he said, like he was reading a verdict. "But we run it exactly as tested. No improvising." Caleb put on his most innocent expression. Who would improvise? Sienna looked at him like she'd known him since he was born. "You would." And here, where the day could have stayed normal, this is the moment where we could have ridden the coaster 3 times, yelled like kids, taken a photo, and left to go eat dinner and argue about whether reopening the park was genius or insanity. Instead, Caleb did what Caleb always does. He noticed something. He climbed into the operator booth with Mia and started tapping at the controls like he was trying to remember a song on a piano he hadn't played in years. Mia watched his hands like a hawk, ready to slap him. "What are you doing?" she asked. Caleb pointed at a small display that Jules had probably looked at a dozen times already and dismissed. "This," he said. "You see that?" Jules stepped closer, frowning. "That's odd." Nate craned his neck. "What?" "There's a routing option," Caleb said, excitement creeping into his voice. "Like an alternate track setting." I felt my stomach dip. There is no alternate track. "That's what I thought," Caleb said, and his grin widened, which is never a good sign. "But look, it says Branch B." Mia's eyes widened. Nope, absolutely not." Jules leaned in, scanning the panel more seriously now. "Branch B," he repeated, quieter. "That's not standard labeling for a transfer track. That's a route selection." Sienna's voice was flat. "Do we know what it does?" Jules shook his head slowly. "Not from this interface." Mia jabbed a finger at the panel like it had offended her personally. "Then we don't touch it. That's the rule. Unknown equals no." Caleb held up his hands. "I'm not saying we do anything reckless. I'm saying it's weird. And we own this place. We should know what our equipment does." "I don't like that sentence either," Nate muttered. I walked to the edge of the platform and stared down the track. From here, everything looked normal. The lift hill, the first drop, the loop that cut against the sky like a question mark, the mid-course brakes, the final run that brought you back home. No visible split, no branching rails, nothing that suggested another path existed. And yet that little display said it did. If you're listening to me tell this and you're already thinking, why would you try it? Trust me, I've asked myself that 1,000 times. I've built entire imaginary versions of this day where I'm smarter, calmer, more cautious. Where I grab Caleb by the shirt and drag him out of the booth. Where I tell everyone to go home. But the truth is simpler and more embarrassing. We were high on being 12 again. Caleb said, "Let's do a dry run." "A what?" Mia demanded. "A dry run," he repeated like it solved everything. "We send an empty train, no riders. If it's just a maintenance route, it'll come back. If it's a glitch, it'll reset. We're not risking anybody." Jules hesitated, and I could see his mind doing math faster than his face could show. "An empty cycle is less risky," he admitted like it pained him. Mia looked betrayed. "Jules." "I said less risky," he corrected, "not safe." Sienna crossed her arms. "If we do it once. We watch every inch we can. We document it. Then we lock the setting back and pretend we never saw it." Mia stared at all of us, then at Caleb. "You people are unbelievable." And then she did something that still makes me weirdly sad. She stepped back, put both hands on the operator lever and said, "Fine, but you all owe me dinner for the rest of my life." Caleb toggled the setting. The display changed from standard to branch B. Somewhere deep under the platform, a mechanism moved. Not a little click, a slow, dragging, metallic grind that made the hair on my arms lift. It went on longer than I expected, 10 seconds, 20, 30, like something heavy was sliding into place far away. "Okay," Nate said softly, "that's a lot." Mia swallowed. "Empty train, one cycle, then we're done." We released the train. It rolled forward, clacked up the lift hill, and vanished over the crest like it always did. We listened for the familiar sequence, the roar of wheels, the whoosh through the loop, the rumble as it hit the final brakes. At first, everything sounded normal. Then it didn't. There was a moment after the mid-course brakes where the sound shifted, like the train moved into a place where the acoustics were different. The rumble didn't echo the way it should have. The whoosh sounded muffled. The timing felt wrong. And then the train didn't return. A full minute passed, then another. Jules glanced at his watch. Cycle time is exceeded. Caleb's grin faded into something tighter. Maybe it's moving slower on the alternate route. Mia's voice went small. Or maybe it's stuck. We waited. A distant clunk echoed somewhere behind the gift shops. Not loud, but definitive, like a door shutting. Sienna's eyes narrowed. "Did you hear that?" Another sound followed. A faint, hollow vibration that traveled up through the platform under our feet, like something below us had woken up and rolled over. I looked at Caleb, put it back. Caleb's fingers hovered. "If I put it back mid-cycle and it's on the alternate route." "Put it back," I said again, sharper. Jules stepped in, overriding him with the calm authority of a man who had tried to save people from themselves for a living. He toggled the setting back to standard. The same grinding sound started again, even longer this time, like the mechanism was reluctant to move. And then finally the train returned. It rolled into the station at a crawl, brakes squealing, looking normal except for one detail that made my stomach flip. The front panel of the first car was dusted with pale dirt, like it had been dragged through a tunnel that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Mia backed away like the train had eyes. "Nope, no, we are done." Caleb stared at the dust, and I watched the exact moment curiosity relit behind his fear. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, so it's real." Jules's voice was tight. "We don't ride Branch B." Sienna nodded. "We don't." Nate laughed once, but it didn't sound like humor. "Cool, great. We found the secret nightmare route. Let's go eat." And we should have. We really should have. But then Caleb did the thing that will haunt me until I'm old and half forget my own name. He looked at me like he was sharing a private joke between the two of us and said, "Ethan, we promised we ride it until the sun went down." I stared back, on the normal track. He tilted his head slightly. "You saw the dust." And the worst part is, I understood what he meant. It wasn't logical, it wasn't safe, it wasn't smart. But it was ours. The line between ownership and entitlement is thinner than people want to admit. When you tell yourself something belongs to you, you start believing the rules that apply to other people don't apply to you. That's not horror movie logic. That's real-life logic. That's how people walk into danger with a smile. Mia refused. She planted herself in the operator booth like a guard. "I'm not riding Branch B," she said, "and I'm not letting you do it without me knowing." Jules didn't want to. Sienna didn't want to. Nate didn't want to. And yet when Caleb said, "One ride," nobody physically stopped him from climbing into the front car. So I climbed in too. Not because I was brave, not because I wanted to be reckless, because some childish part of me was terrified of being the only one who didn't go, because I told myself that if I was there, I could control it. That's another lie people tell themselves right before everything goes wrong. "I'll go so I can keep things from going wrong." Mia's hand shook on the lever. "This is stupid," she whispered. Caleb smiled at her like a brother. "Just launch us. Then you can say I told you so forever." Jules sat behind us, jaw clenched. Sienna and Nate took the next row. The restraints clicked down with that heavy, final sound that always makes you understand, deep in your bones, that you are now committed to whatever comes next. Mia looked at me through the booth window. Her expression wasn't fear. It was anger. Anger that we weren't listening. And then she released the train. The climb up the lift hill felt normal. The park spread out below us, glowing gold in the late daylight, and for a moment my body relaxed into the familiar rhythm of anticipation. We crested the top. We dropped. The first half of the ride was exactly what it always had been. Fast, loud, clean adrenaline. Wheels screaming on steel. Air snapping against my face. That childish joy, the kind that makes you feel like your life is uncomplicated for 60 seconds. And then, right after the mid-course breaks, the train took a turn it had never taken before. It wasn't a dramatic split you could see coming. It was subtle, a slight shift, a hidden switch that redirected us like a hand guiding a toy into a different room. The track dipped behind the gift shops, and instead of rising into the familiar final roll, we slid downward into a rectangular opening in the ground that should not have existed. The light disappeared like someone shut a lid. We were in darkness so complete my eyes couldn't even argue with it. The air changed instantly, cooler, damp, smelling faintly of old concrete and something metallic. I heard Nate swear behind me. I heard Sienna inhale sharply. I heard Jules say very quietly, "Oh no." And then the restraints loosened. Not fully, not open, just enough to feel wrong. My hands flew to the bar, fingers locking so hard my knuckles ached. The train rolled forward into the dark, and the sound of the wheels changed again, hollower, echoing in a space much bigger than it should have been. A dim yellow light flickered on ahead, then another, like a long hallway of tired bulbs coming awake one by one. We entered a vast underground chamber. I'm not exaggerating. This wasn't a maintenance tunnel. This wasn't a basement. This was an engineered void, a space so large it felt like someone had built a second park under the first, except instead of bright rides and music, it was track everywhere. Rails looping and twisting into darkness, climbing toward the ceiling and plunging into pits, sections that ended abruptly, cars parked at strange angles like abandoned toys. And the worst part wasn't the size. It was the feeling. That heavy, pressing sensation that the space was meant for this, that it wasn't an accident we'd found it, that it had been waiting. Let me be clear, nothing jumped out at us. No creature, no gore, no cartoon villain laughing in the shadows. The fear came from something more realistic and more sickening. The sense that we had entered a system designed to make people panic, and that system was still running. The train slowed and climbed another lift hill inside the chamber, chain rattling like teeth. Halfway up, the restraints tightened again on their own, as if the ride had decided it needed us secured for what came next. Jules leaned forward, voice strained. "This isn't in any blueprint I've seen." Caleb's head turned slightly, like he was trying to hear the chamber itself. "So it's real," he whispered. "Yeah," Nate snapped. "Congratulations, it's real. Now how do we leave?" The train crested the hill and moved onto a straight section where, ahead, the rails split into 4 colored lanes: red, blue, green, and orange. At the point of the split there was a transfer mechanism, and above it, hanging from a bracket like an old stopwatch, was a timer panel with 4 buttons that matched the tracks. We rolled to a stop. The timer ticked. Caleb stared. "That's not normal." Sienna's voice was steady in the way people try to be steady when they can feel their control slipping. "It's making us choose." Jules swallowed. "Or it's choosing for us if we don't." Nate's laugh came out thin. "This is like some messed up carnival game." And in that moment, with the timer ticking and the lights humming and the 4 paths stretching into shadow, I understood something I didn't want to understand. This wasn't a hidden maintenance route. It was a feature. Someone had built Branch B to be used. Someone had wanted riders down here. I wish I could tell you what each track led to with certainty. I can't. The chamber was too big and the rails were too tangled and the light was too weak. I saw water glinting somewhere on the blue path. I saw the green path climbing toward a high hill that ended in darkness. I saw the red path aiming toward what looked like a concrete wall. The orange path dipped steeply, vanishing into a lower level. Caleb's voice cracked. "Orange, more track means more time." Nate whispered blue. "Water's better than whatever this is." Jules said, "We don't have enough information. None of this is." Sienna cut in, calm and brutal. "Timer's almost done." I looked at the panel. The glass over the timer was scratched so badly the numbers blurred, but I could tell we didn't have long. My mouth was dry. My palms were slick. If you're expecting me to say I made a heroic, perfect choice, I need you to understand. There are no perfect choices when someone else built the trap. There's only the choice you can live with and the choice that lives with you. I hit the orange button. Somewhere below, the transfer mechanism groaned, metal sliding against metal with that same slow reluctance, as if the chamber itself disliked being disturbed. The track clicked into place. The brakes released, and we rolled into the orange path, down toward whatever waited beneath the park. I'm going to stop here, not to tease you, but because the next stretch is where everything breaks open. The separation, the aftermath, and the part that still doesn't make sense no matter how many times I replay it. If you want, send me just the word "continue," and I'll immediately carry on from the moment the train drops into the orange track, all the way through what I saw behind the observation window and what happened to the park afterward.